Today I'm joined by my good friend and homie from Seattle in the Pacific Northwest, Maria Colacurcio, the CEO of Syndio, the leading workplace equity and fairness platform. So Maria and I go way back, and I remember her because we used to run into each other at the GigWire top of the CEO of the year conferences, which she won, I think, twice, and she beat me twice on it. So very proud of her, very proud of having her on the podcast. And she was, as you may not know, the co-founder of Smartsheet, which turned out into a giant and one of the prides and jewels of the Pacific Northwest. And she also had leadership roles at Starbucks, where she championed pay equity and pay transparency. Maria has led Syndio in a super exciting direction, which is the agentic direction, and with the launch of Syndi, an AI pay expert delivering precise and consistent compensation decisions that you can trust. As you know, pay equity and pay fairness is a huge subject. It's a very sensitive subject. It's a very important subject in a massive market, and she is one of the leaders in this market. She has some incredible insight to share about how to shift from SaaS to AI agents. How do you cannibalize your own business and come out on top? And how do you kick off your AI growth in a very impactful way? And finally, she will share some tips on how to use AI for board prep. Maria, let's get paid.
So tell me, how has this influenced the way that you're running Syndio, specifically through the transition, right, of like SaaS to agents, the chaos of the 2022, just enlightening us on how do your journey from taking over the job, running it, pivoting, now resurging with the agents, and all of the things that you have to do and the glorious job of being a CEO of a SaaS company.
Yeah, I mean, you've been around the block with this. It's I think it just continues to emphasize the characteristic of agility and adaptability and resilience. And I think, that is part and parcel to parenting, but it's also just this notion of consistency. So again, I
Mm.
mentioned my rituals, and it actually is applicable in that my family dinners aren't all that. Like sometimes it's just a big vat of pasta that I put in the middle of
You
the
have 7
counter.
kids after all. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's
Sure,
Oliver
yeah.
style, they're dishing it into their bowl and we all go sit down. It's not the best that it could be, but it's consistent. And I
Yep.
think what founders and CEOs are realizing who are making this transition from SaaS to AI is you have to do so with conviction, consistency, and just a drive to sort of make the leap and continue pushing and to focus with consistency on the things that matter. Like what matters is they're getting fed and we're looking each other in the eyeballs once a day and having
Right.
conversation. What doesn't matter is it a main with 3 side dishes and are there always vegetables? Like the answer is no. But we keep moving forward, everyone keeps getting fed. And that's exactly how I think about this transition. I mean, if you look at the pace in which AI has taken root, it's like 30% now of workers are using AI at work. It started
Yeah.
as this incredible consumer thing, and now it's moving into the workforce, but there's also massive trust issues with it. So if it doesn't perform in the way that people expect, they abandon it. And that's really a change management hurdle that organizations that we serve, so enterprise organizations, we have 350 customers that are some of the biggest companies in the world. And as we move into AI, it just makes trust and accuracy so paramount because as you see this shift from behavior in consumer life to moving to work life and you see the bar in which it needs to meet to be adopted in a meaningful way, you've got to be able to have that trust and that accuracy.
Well, you are at the tipping point of AI. You're bringing AI to the point of people decision making.
We are.
How do you even navigate that when an AI is giving recommendations about how people get paid and like, how you compare against the rest of the organization? How do you drive pay equity? I mean, these are thorny issues before AI. And with
They are.
AI, they just compound, right? Like, so how do
Yes.
you make people safe and trustworthy?
So we've been in this business for 7 years, providing pay equity software for 350 companies and analyzing 10 million employees across those companies in a global way. And if you think about the confluence of the two things that are really driving this for our business, it's the acceleration of pay transparency, which despite current US administrative hurdles is still moving. There are still states actually pushing pay transparency legislation, but in the EU, you've got the EU directive on pay transparency, which goes into effect June of 26. And this requires a whole host of things from multinational companies in that they have a pay gap over 5%. They have to report it. They have to have an action plan. They have to do right to information, which means if an employee asks, I want to see my comparable peers, they have to answer within a certain amount of time, like tons
They
of
do?
complexity.
Wait, you can ask for your peer salary?
Not the exact salary, but against the median. And you have to know
Oh,
where
okay,
you
okay,
stand in
okay.
terms of like for like. And companies, the core of this is the articulation, understanding, and confidence in why do we pay what we pay. And that is the foundation of the problem that we're now solving with AI. Because you've got transparency here, and then you've got this incredible AI transformation happening here that gives us the ability to get so precise. So, to answer your question, a lot of companies that are popping up who are trying to look at things like pay decisions are plugging in a bunch of data, employee systems of record, market
Mhm.
data, into a generic LLM and saying, what do I pay people? And there is a massive
I
problem
used to
with
wait. I used to is that really happening?
it's happening. People are testing that as a strategy.
Oh, wow.
And that is incredibly dangerous for a couple of reasons. Number one, we have a federal law which is don't ask prior salary for a reason. The reason that was put into place is because it was found to perpetuate existing pay gaps and existing
Yeah.
bias. Number two, there's so much complexity in the unstructured data. When you think about what we're able to ingest from a context engineering perspective, are things like your comp philosophy, your job leveling framework. Why do you value what you value? For what roles do you value things where in other roles you don't? And what AI is masterful at is in every single pay decision, you're not only making a recommendation that's precise to nab the candidate at whatever particular level of importance that candidate is for you. Maybe for data science roles, you're willing to take on a bit of compression. You're willing to take on a bit of risk on the pay equity side because you need to be competitive and grab those candidates. But at least with a solution like ours, you're aware of what risk you're taking on versus, let's say you're hiring a whole bunch of data center technicians. For those roles, you're probably going to accept the acceptance rate at like 50% because for those roles, what matters to you is reducing payroll waste. You don't want to spend a dollar more than what you need to get those candidates because there's such a huge supply. So
Right.
AI enables us to be incredibly precise with taking into account the impact on existing employees when you're bringing candidates in, but also thinking about how do you just make those offers for vanilla roles at scale more seamless, faster. Don't let candidates sit on the sideline. Don't waste time. Don't waste money.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I'm fascinated about right now is that there is $300 billion of SaaS revenue out there that has a slowdown that, got massive amounts of investments from VCs that doesn't have an exit to the public markets yet, that needs to figure out the next gear of growth. You are part of this new breed of companies that is embracing AI ahead of the game to kick off growth. Why do you do it? Like, there's not everyone is doing it. Like, you're one of the few. Look, I work with everybody, and you're one of the few that decided to just like burn the boats, head into the mountains. We're going. Like, what was that seminal moment? Walk us through it. How do you align everyone in your org to say, like, we're doing this? We're not doing what Syndio was a year ago. This is a new Syndio. It's Syndi, and let's go.
I think because it became so clear to me that the pay equity business, while we innovated massively on what it was
Hmm.
7 years ago when we emerged, it was outsource your pay equity analysis to a law firm or a consulting firm, and they're going to give you a 150-page crosstab report on who to pay and how much, and you're going to learn nothing. There's going to be no insights as to the behaviors or practices that are driving those issues to begin with. So we created tremendous innovation in applying software to this problem. But when I look at my customers today and what I saw in the possibility of AI is that we were still solving a problem in a backward looking episodic way. We were still helping our customers do their analysis, which resulted in a huge cost in remediation that they had to trot into the office of the CFO and say, "Hey, I need 2 million bucks to go pay these people fairly." As a business owner and a CEO, You never want to be a cost center to your customers. And
Right.
so bless our customers for trusting us and for investing and being committed to the cause and wanting to pay people fairly and seeing that as a competitive differentiator. But as a CEO, you're thinking, I can apply this transformational technology to no longer be a cost center, but to actually be a cost saver to my customers.
Mm,
Now, in addition to showing them where the guardrails are in terms of reducing remediation, which is cost savings, I can also now take this wide range with all of this discretion in terms of how and why they pay people and get really precise to the degree that they're saving millions of dollars a year in wasted spend that they don't have to spend. So I think
yeah,
for me, it was just such an obvious way to apply technology to get out of a SaaS product that was still, as innovative as it was, backward looking, episodic, and something that wasn't a daily use.
that's amazing. How do you propagate that belief through your organization? You're very convicted. The rest of your, several hundred people org may or may not be. You actually don't know at this scale. So how do you evangelize that point of view inside of your own four walls?
Personally, I believe that change management and internal communication as a communicator, that is the field from which I emerge. I'm not an engineer. I grew up in communications and marketing. So you would think this would be the easiest thing for me. It is so challenging because what you're trying to do is enable folks within your organization to take up a mantle, which is in many cases actually commoditizing your existing product. So when you say to them, follow me into the fire, I know we're burning the boats, burning the bridges, but trust me, it's going to be worth it. And the future and the path that we're taking you on is going to be so much more fruitful. And we're going to be entering into a world in which there's so much more possibilities and value that we're driving for our customers, but you can't see it clearly. You don't know exactly where you're going. And so it's just this incredible test of trust and resilience and adaptability. And people who are not comfortable leading through change will leave because you
Mm,
really have to be comfortable leading through change, believing in the vision. And I think the internal communication strategy has to be such that you're okay with a little bit of attrition for folks that are like,
right,
listen, I'm bought into what we were. I don't necessarily agree with where we're going, and I don't believe that that's the right direction. There
right.
has to come a point for CEOs and founders that you say, this might not be the place for you. And you have to accept that. And I think that is the most difficult thing for any of us to do because we love our employees. We want them to believe us. We want to think that we're like the inspirational beacon of the future that they trust and believe in. But it's just not realistic that everyone's going to see that vision in the same way. And so I think the most powerful thing is coming to terms with that moment where you say, I get it. Might not be the right choice for you to stay.
Interesting. How do you communicate that to the board? Like, how was the board supportive? You're as a non-founder, you come into this conversation, you tell them, look, this is a pivot. A lot of people are gonna like it. Your engagement scores are gonna go down. Blind is gonna go wild. Things are not gonna look good for a little bit, and I need you to stay with it. What was that conversation like?
It's not only that, it's now we're also pushing our employees to adopt AI, particularly in engineering. We have an
Mm,
engineering leader in Nimrod that is very progressive, and he is driving his team to leverage AI in every possible way to increase velocity and to push velocity and to make sure that we are on the like not on cutting edge, but on the bleeding edge in
mm,
relationships with various vendors, with you all. I mean, we're in a really exciting progressive relationship with paid that's going to enable us to present clear enterprise ROI to our customers, not only on how we're saving money with pay decisions, but really this beautiful network effect and butterfly effect of pay decisions over time. And how do you align pay to business outcomes? So when you have an engineering leader that's on the bleeding edge and pushing his team to adopt AI when they don't want to in some cases, and you combine that with the pivot, you're absolutely going to see those things that you mentioned start to blow up with the talk track,
yeah,
not necessarily positive. On the board side, I have a tremendously supportive board. And I think what's exciting about the board and the top level is they've been incredibly encouraging as they watch us go through this pivot because they see it. They're working with
Right.
enough companies day to day that they see the writing on the wall. They see the way this is going. They see their SaaS companies in the portfolio struggling. And so I think from that perspective, I had a tremendous amount of support.
Have they share with you how others are going through the same transition? Or are you schooling them? Are you holding Maria, business hours here to educate every other CEO to how you burn the boats and move forward?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think the companies that are doing it in a way that's as extreme as we are is not necessarily always the case. More so because we've got this existing platform that's incredible and will continue to be a feature of the new. So when we think about Syndi as an agentic platform, pay equity is going to be a feature of that. So we don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to set our legacy product on fire because it really does play a role in the future. It's just a supporting role instead of the main character. So I think we have
Mm,
a benefit from that perspective in that our future and existing customers want pay equity built in as a constraint to how they make pay decisions, but they
right.
don't want it to be the main show. They want a little more flexibility around it. What I am hearing from my board over and over and over again, and the questions that come up, which you have great answers to, is around pricing. So I think every single SaaS now AI company is grappling with this notion of how do we price? Because the reality of this is you have SaaS-based pricing. Now you
Right.
have an AI solution that requires an incredible amount of compute, which hits your P&L as a business. And so how do you present pricing to a customer that covers your costs and gives you a profit and a margin? And how do you consistently achieve those margins that we've been notorious for in the SaaS business, high margin business, but
Right.
also that is consistent and predictable. So our CFOs are really nervous about like a pay as you go. They're like, what does that mean? How am I able to
100%.
predict
Yeah.
costs for my enterprise? And so many of these businesses are just throwing pay as you go at the wall as like the answer. And that's not the answer for the enterprise. So I
Mm.
think the conversations that I hear in the boardroom over and over are number one, how do we get our CEOs to adopt AI? And I can share a story on that in a second as to how I actually leveraged a custom GPT with my board prep for a board meeting.
Oh, that's amazing.
And then on the second is how are we going to tackle pricing?
So let's talk about how you GPT your board prep.
Oh, so I was, trying to figure out you've got board management. You have a whole bunch of different board members with different viewpoints on the things they're going to dig into. And you know all of this. I've had
Yeah.
virtually the same board for 7 years. So I created a custom GPT ahead of my board meeting and I created a prompt that had all the specifics about each board member and their propensities for types of information. One really cares about pipeline, one digs in on this, one digs in on that. I loaded it up with my board deck and a bunch of messaging and positioning and then obviously the prompt included the things I wanted to emphasize. And then I recorded a Loom that explained it and that talked about what we would be focused on in that upcoming meeting. And I shared the GPT with them. And the response was overwhelming in terms of how helpful and useful that was for them to go through a pre read in a really personalized way. And I think the question CEOs are always asking themselves is how do you get to a board meeting and make it conversational, make it useful, get strategy out of them? And it really was a way to facilitate conversation in a personalized way where they came in with their questions answered. And I didn't have to go down rabbit holes in the meeting for each particular personality.
Got it. All right. So back to the other question. I want to pick on this because this is a very important topic. So every SaaS CEO that I'm talking to, and I think you and I are in the same sort of like cohort, if you would, of like 10 years or so of SaaS before the whole world went agentic, and now we're trying to catch the next wave and go with it. And there's two core problems, right? Like how hard do you go on agents versus the current business? And number two, how do you bring the company along, right? The easiest way to bring the company along is to do nothing or to do very little. And so do incrementally and boil the frog, if you would. On the opposite side of the spectrum, you have to capture the moment, burn the ships, go all in, and whoever gets on board, and everybody else, who doesn't agree, can leave. What would you advise CEOs to do as they're making this progression, this change?
Oh my goodness, there's so many things that go into that. So we had the benefit of having an incredible runway and being break even and those types of things, which gave me flexibility that other CEOs don't have. I don't have my
But most people are, and you're special in that you came in later in the game to the CEO job.
Mhm.
You are an incredible communicator, so you can teach everybody else how to communicate. Most CEOs suck at communication, and you made this bet. Like this bet is public and it's out there, and now you got to go deliver it.
Yep.
A lot of CEOs are not doing that. Like out of the 300 billion in TAM, I think only 2 or so% are moving in your direction. Everybody else is frozen in the water right
I think this is a moment to be bold. And I think you have to be bold and you have to see the writing on the wall. And it's really difficult because this is about, in some cases, cannibalizing something that worked really well for you as a company. And I
now.
think in SaaS, we were all in that boat. We had a product that was working. We had sales reps that were hitting quota. We had, all of these things that were sort of working. But my strong belief is that if you don't jump on board, you're not only gonna get commoditized in a way that you could do yourself, which means you can bring a piece of your legacy with you, like we're doing in pay equity. We're reimagining the value of our SaaS solution within the agentic platform
Right.
and bringing it along with us, but you're going to get usurped by an AI solution. So not only are you going to miss the opportunity to innovate on your own offerings and bring them along with you in a reimagined way, you're likely going to be put out of business by something that is just faster, easier, cheaper. And the companies that are sprouting up right now are moving with such incredible velocity that you as a SaaS company, you cannot keep up. You will not keep up. If you're doing AI as a bolt-on chatbot on existing systems and you're not investing the time to do it from the ground up and truly be AI native. I mean, we started this 15 months ago in terms of completely building Syndi from scratch because
Mm.
Syndi needs to be headless and embedded in Teams and Slack and where people work and be able to create new integrations to ATS systems and spin those up in a week or two. This is what's required now. So if you're
Right.
hanging on to your SaaS infrastructure and architecture and thinking you can just slap a GPT on top, you're
Y-
faster, more early stage companies will quickly overcome you. That's my belief.
Yeah, yeah. Was there what do you see that in your world, or you just imagine that will happen, so you just run?
I see that in my world. I mean, I don't see it with something that has the sophistication of pay equity yet, because
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
it is very sophisticated. There's a lot of legal, has to be defensible in a court of law. And so I think people are going right to the edge of what is legally defensible pay equity and kind of stopping there.
Right.
But I'm seeing it everywhere, and I can only imagine that tests that we've done inside the company, there is a lightweight version of this that can be done leveraging AI that
Right.
that's out there. And so I think we're seeing it in all sorts of places, and you can see it just by reviewing, I love looking at the YC batches of companies that are coming through.
Yeah.
It's sort of it's like a great check on where things are going. And when you see some of the stuff these folks are doing, yes, some of them are going to go belly up because ChatGPT or OpenAI is going to release a feature that's going to overcome them. And I think the V1 AI companies, we see that in spades, right? It was like sales
Right.
prospecting and they just or code or whatever it was, and they just got hammered. But there are some really novel approaches now. And I think in the minds of new sprouting founders is already the shift of how do I make sure this isn't something that can be replicated by a generic LLM?
So I love that when you and I talked about Cindy, you were back to day one for Cindy, right? You had to go prospect customers who will get on board with this new point of view that you have on the world, right? Like the pay equity is a conversation. The pay equity is something that you have to think about the future and bring it back to today. The agent is going to help you think about salaries in this particular form. You're going to have to trust the LLM that is going to give you the right answer, and so on and so forth. How was it like for you to like be bold and go back to like startup mode, if you would. Like day zero, let's go find new customers and grow from there.
It's fun. I actually love sort of the 0 to 1 build. That was the phase that I really remember fondly from Smartsheet as well in terms of and this was something we thought about. So, like, when Rob and I were both at Starbucks and we were thinking about pay equity and going through, before we found Zev and joined forces, we were really thinking about a solution that is more similar to what we're doing with Syndi in terms of how do you stop looking at this from the rear view. And again, we introduced a SaaS version of this called Payfinder. And the difference between Payfinder and Syndi is the underpinning of the power of AI. Payfinder was a very simple solution that took your competitive market range side by side with your equitable range, and it gave you a recommendation for one purpose: to reduce remediation and future gaps. So it was preventative from one angle. And what changed everything for me is when I looked at the possibilities of embedding AI into this, it's not just about preventing inequity anymore. There's so much more business value that we can offer to our customers.
100%.
And
100%.
it hits with what they care about. Like right now, I was speaking at a conference 2 days ago in New York, and I did a poll about AI and what the mandate is for these folks, and it was mostly sort of AI transformation type titles, and 70%, it's still about cost efficiency. And so if you think about, we're gonna go to market with a solution that just preventatively does pay decisions to reduce inequity, that's gonna die on the vine. You have
Mm,
to expand your purview to say, "How am I going to help companies reduce costs?" Because that's what they all care about right now.
yeah. Are you seeing the same writing on the wall around seat-based pricing of there will be fewer seats in the future, so let's move on to agents so that the agents can make the decision and I can charge for their work, which is a lot higher in the seat, or is this not affecting you?
So it's funny. I just did a webinar right before this with one of our customers, Howell from TD Synex, which is a 25,000 person company. They were an early design partner for us on Syndi. And what he talked about in the first couple minutes of the webinar was this move for them. Again, they're in 50 countries, 25,000 person company, from the hub and spoke of the HRBP being at the center to what
Yeah.
they're calling specialized services. And this really is sort of the IBM playbook. And what you
Mm,
what that entails is they have in many cases eliminated a ton of roles and created sort of this pod model where it's a human managing a whole bunch of agents. And
interesting.
I see it
Wait, they have it running right now?
they are doing it with IBM's Watson is what they're
Yeah.
doing. They're in the very early stages, but yes, they're moving from this sort of hub and spoke with the HRBP at the center to this specialized services, which is sort of the bottom foundation of the pyramid are agents. So I think what's key here is when we think about how do we value work, we have to think about work in terms of humans and agents and the hybrid model of what the
Right.
workforce is going to look like. And you have to start thinking about what is the value of a dollar when applied to a human and what is the value of a dollar when applied to an agent and where should you be putting those dollars. And I'll give you an example. There's so much payroll waste right now on both ends. Number one, you have people within your organization that are extremely, extremely successful as it relates to driving outcomes for the business. And
Yep.
then you have people that are highly overpaid. And what hasn't happened is if you think about pay decisions. So let's think about Syndi for a customer that's just starting to use it.
Yep.
You pay a premium in these roles for someone who's ex Google or ex OpenAI. Cool.
Yep.
So we pay that premium, we pay it with consistency. You're ex OpenAI, so we're gonna pay up for you. And then now what Cindy's doing is tracking this network effect and this butterfly effect. And a year later, when that person's up for promotion, we find that the performance scores aren't so good. And in fact, 28% of the people coming in on that premium have actually left, and it was n- non-regrettable attrition or separation. So what Cindy's going to do is Cindy.
Isn't all of it non-regrettable?
Yeah, exactly. And so what Cindy's going to do is take that network effect and go back to that point of hire the next time and say, actually, for your organization, you're paying up for this premium that doesn't play out for you in the future.
That's amazing. That is unbelievably amazing because like nobody has that kind of memory.
Nobody
You see
has
what I
that
mean?
kind of memory, and there's so many people involved that people don't even remember that was the premium. And what's happening to your culture, by the way, when you do that, and you've been in organizations like this, they pay the big top dollar for the special
Oh my God.
snowflakes.
Like what you're saying is the reason why I drink.
Yeah.
100% is
It's
true.
probably why you started your own thing. You're like, what in God's name are these people doing other than this special pedigree?
Yeah.
And they're actually promoting more toxicity in the organization, but nobody seems to notice. And then the the talk track is the thing that kills me the most. When that person is separated or they leave, there's this conversation that happens in behind closed doors. It's just like, man, that's a bummer because we really paid up for them.
Right. And then you ate the salary and they probably
Exactly.
performed for 6 months. And then they were like, well, I can get a job at the next hot LLM thing. And they stop performance. So you're still paying them for it. You're not getting that performance. They're looking for the next job. They leave. Bad shit happens, right? Like bad performance reviews, bad glass doors, bad whatever. And then you're left worse than where you started.
Exactly. And then you think about the flip side, and this is where I think companies are going to, there's going to be a check and adjust and a test period, but companies are going to start to figure out what are the types of roles that agents are good at and where we should be deploying them, and what are the types of roles where we really need our humans. So, like Syndi, for example, we always have a human in the loop. Cindy's not making the decision. Cindy's making a recommendation. And the
Yeah.
human in the loop is sort of making the decision. But I think as you develop that decision graph or that network effect, that butterfly effect under the hood, humans are going to start getting more input as to where does it make sense for the humans to be humans and the agents to be agents. Like one great example is one of our early customers on Cindy, th- they didn't care about all of the stuff I'm talking about in terms of value. They were basically like, today it takes us 7 days to make an offer. That's insane. We want it to take 30 minutes. There's too much
Yeah.
back and forth. Our comp team is
Yeah. Yeah.
involved in every single decision. How can you just get rid of that and move it from
Right.
7 days to 30 minutes? Easy. So there's tremendous cost savings in there. But in that scenario, they weren't trying to reduce their comp team. Their comp team was just so overtaxed making these dumb vanilla offer decisions. And
Right.
really, they needed the comp team doing better, more strategic work around figuring out the right comp philosophy for the following year. So in that scenario, it was like, yes, let's put Cindy, the agent, on the back and forth and get rid of that work.
100%. So let's talk about how you get paid. So like Cindy does all these things, right? From accelerating decision making on offers all the way from saving you a whole year of pain for overpaying for an engineer that's not going to work out.
Hmm.
So don't give me your pricing yet because I know we're working on this together. But like, what are the pockets of value that you should go capture in your mind? Like, what are the budget pools that are now part of Syndi that were not part of Syndio?
Oh my goodness. The biggest number one is just payroll waste. So thinking about your headcount spend as the largest line item on your P&L and
Yeah.
how is that money allocated? And CFOs tell me over and over and over again, we put
Well,
these
like, give me a sense of size. Like, how big is that for a $100 million company run rate wise?
it's massive. Think about 2% of your headcount costs are probably just full-blown waste.
Damn. Whoa. That's a big number. It's about the R&D at Outreach alone is like, let's say 50 or so million. So like that's $1 million cold of
It's
waste.
not even that. When you think about payroll waste and then you think about hiring efficiently. So what is the customer example I just gave you? Like what if they were able to increase their time to fill by 1%? What does that look like? And
Right.
and the other thing that AI enables you to do, which I think we're starting to get at because we're building these incredible with the help of some really incredible folks that I actually brought off the bench from retirement who were compensation experts. We're building these incredible comp agents that are also able to identify upstream before a JD is even posted whether this job is over leveled. So think about cost
Mm.
savings there. So I'm going to level it a level 7, but actually when our agents go and scrape the job content, they look at the skills and experiences required, they compare that to market, they compare it to your job architecture and role leveling, and Syndi immediately says should actually be a level 6, you just saved 15% that compounds year over year.
So I haven't heard, like, look, I have 5 of these a day. My co-founders have another 5. So like combined, we have about 15 of these a day. I never heard this point of view before. So you're clearly first, best, and own it, but you're on borrowed time. Like it's only a matter of time before, like if you're successful, somebody's going to come after you. How are you going to accelerate your go-to-market to make sure that you capture the majority of the market share for this new point of view and become the winner?
Well, I mean, so not to give you a crass commercial message, but that was
Do it, girl. Come on, we're about getting paid. So like, this is the right podcast to do
yeah,
that.
I mean, that was so key into our early discussions as to we have to be able to show the receipts. And the receipts in this case are how are we driving ROI for your enterprise? Where are the cost savings coming from? Where are the productivity improvements coming from? And how do those productivity improvements translate to cost savings? And
Mm.
so when we saw your solution and this idea that we could build in under the hood, the way I think about it are these like little ROI gremlins that go around and they grab every
I
single
love that ROI
like
gremlins.
they're like in the hood of your car, and every time something's happening where we're saving a customer money, whether it's hard or soft, whether it's we've replaced that interaction between comp and talent with Syndi, that's a cost savings, right? Because your agent is doing that at a fraction of the human cost, so that's a cost savings. Or your recruiter just wanted to escalate a particular offer beyond the level that Syndi felt appropriate to nab the talent. Syndi recommended you bring it down. You got the talent. That's a hard cost savings. We just avoided you overspend for a particular role and you still got the candidate. So that is how we're going to win, is by having those true ROI costs with receipts for our customers to be able to show them what this means in terms of the bottom line. And I don't believe other companies in our space are doing that. I think they're talking about it loosely. I think there's a lot of hand waving. You know, it's funny, you talked about Web Summit at the beginning. So there was a session called Translating AI Pilots into Real Enterprise ROI or something like that.
Yeah.
This thing was packed. It was, you think about
big notes. Lots of notes there, because
oh
that's
my
a big
God, there
problem.
was like a line of people standing behind the chairs, 7 lines deep. And the guy that was on stage, great founder, CEO, like, don't know him personally, but the examples he was giving were based on 3 companies. So, I
Oh
mean,
my God.
this is pretty remarkable. You're at Web Summit, the biggest tech conference in the world, and the organization selects someone to speak on enterprise ROI, and the best person shows up and they have 3 examples.
Mm,
That's where we're at. And so that to me is how we're gonna win.
that's amazing. Look, I am so excited for you for a number of reasons. One, this is a real problem. Like I felt that in the flesh. Like these are, a lot of board level discussions that I had, that were unresolved. This is it makes your culture drift when you make the wrong decisions here. Like so the implications are massive, and I think every CEO understands it. Two, because this is a Seattle tech company, and as native Seattle, like we want our home team to win. And number three is because the world will be different when you get your way. So
No.
I appreciate you coming on the podcast, Maria. This is amazing. I personally learned so much. I'm hoping that other SaaS CEOs get inspired by your boldness of vision and execution.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here, and same right back at you. We're rooting for your success.
Appreciate that. All right, Maria. Thanks again.
Thank you.
If you like this podcast, please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever you get your fix.